Hello everyone and welcome. In this video we're going to be checking out the 2015 Chrysler 300C. This is a four-door full-size sedan with seating for 5, and it's actually quite a long vehicle. In fact, it even has a longer wheelbase than a Cadillac Escalade. There's a large trunk with folding rear seats, and there's also quite a bit of legroom in the rear seats. Under the trunk cover is a spare and also the battery, and this is good from a weight distribution point of view, especially since this vehicle is rear-wheel drive. You also still do have a positive terminal up front if you need it. Under the hood is a 3.6-liter V6 engine, dual overhead cams, 4 valves per cylinder, and variable valve timing. Features aluminum block and heads and a compression ratio of 10.2 to 1. It produces 292 horsepower at 6,350 RPM and 260 pound-feet of torque at 4,800 RPM. As far as fuel economy is concerned, this vehicle received a rating of 19 in the city, 31 on the highway, which is actually pretty good for this segment. And in my own testing, about 52 miles of primarily highway, the vehicle achieved about 30.8 miles per gallon. There's many things they've done to improve efficiency with the new model, and several of these include variable steering effort electronic power steering. So there's a hydraulic pump which reduces steering effort at low speeds, but when you're on the highway, power assistance is reduced and this increases the efficiency. They've also changed out the steel axles over to cast aluminum axles to help reduce weight, and the front axle can also detach from the all-wheel drive system if you've purchased the all-wheel drive option when the all-wheel drive is not needed. Optional 20-inch wheels with 245/45 tires, and they've actually got pretty aggressive camber settings on this, -1 degree up front and -1.75 degrees in the rear to help assist in cornering. Now, checking out the interior, there's an immense amount of space in here, so I've got tons of room for my legs. They're not going to come into contact with anything really far away from the steering column, which is nice. I'm 6'1", and I've got plenty of room for my legs in here. Also, these seats very comfortable. They are heated and cooled. Nice, comfortable seats. Good amount of cushion to them, and once again, it's a very spacious interior, so plenty of space for your body. Now, as far as the steering wheel, you've got some cruise control controls on there, and it's also electronically adjustable. You've got a nice set of gauges up front with all kinds of information throughout it. Good-sized navigation screen here with all the stuff you might need. You've got Wi-Fi, you can connect up your phone, satellite radio, things like that, heated seats, as I mentioned, and a fairly simple-to-use climate control system. So overall, the interior doing a pretty good job. And as far as visibility, much better story than the Chrysler 200. Looking out the front, plenty of visibility to the sides. Out the rear, a little bit constricted, but overall okay, and checking your blind spot pretty good. So visibility overall a good story in here, and you also have this very large panoramic sunroof, which is a pretty nice touch. Okay, so let's take it for a quick test drive. Push button start, and a little knob to select which gear, so dial that over to drive. And we're off. Now, it's worth mentioning that with this vehicle's size, it's very heavy. In fact, it's over 4,000 pounds, even with the V6 and only rear-wheel drive. And you'll only add to that if you get the V8 or you get the all-wheel drive version. Now, the Nissan Maxima, a competing vehicle in this segment, weighs about 500 pounds less, which is pretty significant. So the vehicle is pretty heavy. Now, when you put your foot down, you do have a decent amount of power, 292 horsepower, but because of the weight, you don't quite feel it that much. I think you really need to get into that V8 if you really want to feel some good acceleration forces. To put it into perspective, this has about the same power-to-weight ratio as a Scion FRS or a Cadillac Escalade. And it's kind of a hybrid between those two vehicles anyways, because like the Scion FRS and the Cadillac Escalade has a weight distribution, I believe, of 51-49. This is 52-48, and the Scion FRS or Subaru BRZ is 53-47. So all very similar in weight distribution and power-to-weight ratio. Now, the ride quality in this is fantastic. It's a super quiet interior and a really soft suspension. And so the combination is just an extremely comfortable ride. Even softer, I think, than the 200 and even a little bit more quiet. So a really nice interior if you're looking for something comfortable and quiet. Now, as far as the suspension, there's this corner that I go around on all of my fuel economy runs, and basically it's going down a steep downhill grade, and it's a sharp corner, and there's this bump midway through the corner. And so a lot of times what this does is it unsettles the rear axle. And so the vehicle, when you go around this downhill grade around that corner, if you're going at a decent speed, the rear end will kick out a little bit. And so, something that I've noticed is if I take vehicles with moderately stiff suspensions or stiff suspensions and I go around that corner, a lot of times the rear end kicks out. and so you kind of have to have the stability control intervene and regain traction and go down that corner if you're going at a fairly quick speed. Now in both this and the Chrysler 200, when I've gone around that corner, these both have very soft suspensions and they absorb that bump really well, and so neither of them, when I go around that corner, and you know, very unofficial test, but regardless, when I go around that corner, neither of them have the rear end kick out. They stay planted, and I think a lot of that is due to the really soft suspension settings. Okay, so what's it like going through the corners? Well, as I've mentioned, it has a very soft suspension, so going through this, you know, you do get a decent amount of body roll, but it actually seems to hold the corners pretty well. Similar story to the 200, which I'm surprised at how well it holds the corner, and you also don't notice too much understeer if you do start to push it. You know, it seems to be fairly well balanced going through the corners at a fairly aggressive rate. Now, as far as the steering, you know, a decent weight to it, and it seems fine as far as responsiveness. You know, not a ton of feedback. It's not, you know, it's just a comfortable experience. So it's going back to everything about this. It's quiet, it's soft, it's not that much effort required, you know, so it's a comfortable experience all the way around, from the steering to the pedals. You know, the pedal effort, you've got not too much effort required for either the brakes or the accelerator pedal, decent amount of travel in the brakes, and easy to modulate. So the whole story all around is basically just the driver doesn't have to be all that involved. You know, you can kind of relax and drive it at a very comfortable, leisurely pace. Now, as far as the transmission, shifts seem to be decently smooth. You don't really notice it too much shifting between gears, so overall it's a pretty good story there. The one thing is you don't have the ability to select your own gears, but that said, when you are going downhill, it's kind of a smart system. So if you're going down a steep grade and you're on the brakes a lot, it'll keep downshifting until it kind of makes you happy and has enough engine braking that you really don't have to rely on the brakes at all. So I do admire that it at least allows you to do some engine braking when you're going downhill, and you don't have to be so dependent on the brakes or worry about overheating the brakes. That said, it would be nice to just have the ability to manually select the gears in the scenario that you need that. Also worth mentioning about how this vehicle does have a nice quiet interior. You know, you don't get a lot of road noise in it, and on top of that, it has a really nice sound system. And so mixing with the fact that you don't have too much noise coming in and you've got good speakers on the inside, it is a really nice experience cranking up the volume in here. Okay, so we'll get a quick 0 to 60 pull in. I've got the traction control in sport. We'll come to a stop, straighten out, get on the throttle a little bit, and then let off the brake. And there's 60. So I've got the cruise control set at 65, and one of the things worth mentioning about the cruise control is that if you set it from a low speed up to a high speed, or a high speed up to a low, down to a low speed, it tends to actually kind of overshoot wherever your target is by a couple miles an hour. Not a real big deal, but kind of just a controls issue. So if you set it to 65 and you're going 55, it'll sometimes go up to 67, and if you do the reverse, it'll sometimes go down to 53 and then bring it back up to 55. Just kind of interesting. Now, as far as noise levels, this is a very quiet vehicle. You're looking at about, 72 decibels, which is on the very low end. Very similar, in fact, to the Cadillac Escalade as far as road noise. Not too much wind, not too much tire noise. So overall, pretty good experience in here. Why do I keep comparing this to the Cadillac Escalade? It keeps getting brought up. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. Thanks for watching.